The debt notice came on a Tuesday. Not that days meant much on Grand 7, where the sky was rock and the air tasted like iron shavings. But Darrow remembered it was Tuesday because he had just pulled a double shift in the lower shafts, and his boots were still smoking from a gas flare that had taken out 2 ventilation pipes and nearly taken out his left leg with them. He was sitting outside the med bay, waiting for Lena to finish her shift, when Elder Massa walked past with a kind of face that meant something had already been decided. Darrow followed him. The colony hall was packed. Every miner, every maintenance worker, every cook and medic and wire puller on Gran 7 was crammed into a space built for half that number. At the front stood a Varec official in a gray coat that probably cost more than the colony earned in a month. Reptilian face, yellow eyes, a mouth that moved like it had never learned to smile and had stopped trying. Warden Ossel read the notice aloud. The Gran 7 colony owed 412,000 credit units to the Varec Trade Syndicate. The repayment window had closed. Standard debt collection would begin in 30 days, which meant the equipment would go first, then the contracts, then the people, reassigned to syndicate labor posts across the outer sectors. There was, however, one alternative. The syndicate ran the Gorham Ring, the Galactic Arena. It was the most watched broadcast in the known galaxy, and it always needed new fighters. One volunteer from Gran 7, one fighter willing to compete in the arena under a syndicate contract, would satisfy the debt in full. Win or lose, the colony would be cleared. Ossel let the silence sit. Nobody moved. Darrow looked around the room. He saw men who had survived cave-ins and gas pockets and 3 years of reduced oxygen rations. He saw women who had carried sick children through a fever outbreak when the medicine shipment came 6 weeks late. He saw people who had already given everything this rock had asked of them. He looked at Lena. She was near the back wall, still in her med bay coat, holding the hand of a small boy whose lungs rattled when he breathed. Mineral lunch, a condition that came from spending your childhood in a colony with bad filters and a syndicate that never upgraded them. She was not looking at Darrow. She was looking at the floor, which meant she was thinking very hard about something she was afraid to say that he already knew what it was. He raised his hand in no speech. No last words, just a hand going up in a room full of people who had none left to offer. Ossel crossed the floor and looked at Darrow the way a man looks at a tool he is not sure will hold the weight. He checked a small device, scanned something, tapped twice. Name, Darrow. Occupation, miner. Deep shaft. Any combat experience? Darrow thought about the gas flare that morning, about the cave-in in Tunnel 9 that buried 4 men and left 2 of them breathing, about every day underground since he was 16 years old. Some, he said. Ossel made a note and did not look impressed. He had processed a lot of volunteers. Most of them lasted 2 fights. He had seen nothing about this particular human that suggested anything different. The room stayed quiet as Darrow was handed a release form on a thin screen. He signed it. Elder Massa started to say something, an apology, maybe, or a thank you, and Darrow shook his head once. No need. He walked back through the crowd and found Lena. She had let go of the boy's hand. She was just standing there, very still, with her eyes doing something her face was trying hard not to do. The colony is clear, she asked. When I board the transport? Yes. She pressed her lips together. She nodded. She did not say don't go, because she knew what it would mean if he didn't. She did not say come back, because she was a medic and she understood odds. She just put her palm flat against his chest, over his sternum, and left it there for a moment. He covered her hand with his. Just for a second. Then he went to pack. There was not much to pack. A change of clothes. A photograph of Lena and him taken a year their mother died, when they were both trying to smile and not quite managing it. A small flat stone from the deepest shaft on Gran 7, smooth from years of handling. He did not know why he kept it. He put it in his pocket anyway. The syndicate transport was waiting at the colony's upper dock. Ossel was already aboard, already bored. 2 Varec security officers stood at the ramp without expression. Darrow walked up without looking back until he was at the top of the ramp. Then he turned. The whole colony was standing at the dock entrance. Not cheering, not crying, just standing there, watching him go, The way people watch something they know costs more than they can repay. He looked at them for a long moment. He looked at Lena at the front of the crowd, her palms still raised from when she had pressed it to the port window. He held her gaze until the ramp door closed. The transport lifted. Grin, 7 fell away below. Rock and iron and debt and 17 years of his life, shrinking to a point and then gone. Behind him, Ossel spoke without looking up from his screen. Your first match is in 72 hours. Your opponent has killed 43 fighters across 11 species. I suggest you rest. Darrow sat down and looked at the dark outside the window. Does it bleed? He asked. Ossel paused. Everything bleeds. Then we're fine, Darrow said and closed his eyes. The Gorham Ring did not look like a place where people died. That was the point. It looked like a celebration. Lights in every color any species could see, vendors selling food in 17 different atmospheric tolerances, music playing in overlapping frequencies, so every ear got something pleasant. The docking bay alone was bigger than all of Grin 7's colony level. Darrow walked through it with his bag on one shoulder and noticed none of it. He was assigned to Fighter Block 7. A long corridor of individual cells, each size for a different species, each containing a cot, a food unit, and a screen showing the arena schedule. His cell smelled like disinfectant and something older under it that disinfectant never fully covered. Foss was waiting inside. Human, which was rare enough on the Gorham Ring that it took Darrow a moment to process it. Old, heavy-set, eyes that had seen too many fights and started skipping the endings to save himself the trouble. You're my fighter, Foss said. It was not a question. How many fights have you been in? Define fight, Darrow said. Foss looked at him for a long time. We have 72 hours. I'm going to tell you everything I know, and you're going to listen, and then you're probably still going to die, but at least it won't be because I didn't try. Darrow sat on the cot and said nothing, which Foss took as agreement. The training sessions were not about technique. Foss was not a combat instructor. He was an arena veteran, not a fighter, a survivor. He knew how the ring worked. He knew the scoring, the crowd dynamics, the unwritten rules that mattered more than the written ones. He watched Darrow move and said very little because Darrow already knew how to move in ways that had nothing to do with training and everything to do with years of working in spaces that would crush you if you weren't precise. That he gave Darrow his equipment on day 2. Light chest armor, a shock blade, current charged, good for disrupting exoskeletons and neural clusters. A short-range stun emitter. Darrow picked up the emitter, turned it over, and set it down on the bench. You're not taking it? Foss asked. Gets in the way. It could save your life. So could running. I'm not doing that either. Foss did not argue. He had learned, somewhere in the first 24 hours, that arguing with Darrow was a way to use up words without achieving anything. The morning of the fight, Yada came. She was Valori, amphibian species, pale green, large amber eyes, moved with the careful deliberateness of someone used to drier air than they preferred. She wore a Syndicate medical tech badge and carried a scanning instrument. Biometric intake, she said. Standard procedure for new arena fighters. Darrow held out his arm. She ran the scanner. She looked at the readings. She ran it again. Is there a problem? Darrow asked. No, she said, but she was still looking at the screen. Your baseline cortisol levels are quite elevated. I am about to go fight something that has killed 43 people. Yes, that is the normal cause of elevated cortisol. But most fighters show a spike and then a gradual settling as they mentally prepare. Yours has been climbing steadily for 6 hours and shows no sign of settling. She paused. That is unusual. Is it a problem? She looked up at him, then really looked the way a scientist looks at something that does not match the model. I don't know yet, she said honestly, and left. The arena floor was harder than it looked on the screens. Bright lights from above. Sound from everywhere. Breck was already on the other side. 6 limbs, natural exoskeleton, the color of dry blood, antennae up and reading the air. Champion of 3 cycles. The crowd knew him. It cheered when he entered. When Darrow walked out, there was a confused murmur, like a crowd trying to decide how to feel about something they did not recognize. Darrow did not look at the crowd. He looked at Breck and found the seam. Every exoskeleton had one. a place where two plates met and the natural armor thinned. On a Serati, it was under the left arm, between the second and third limb joint. Small, specific, enough. The fight was not clean. Breck was fast, and the first hit sent Darrow sideways hard enough to blur his vision for 2 seconds. He got up. The second hit cracked something in his ribs. He felt the familiar pop of it, knew the difference between broken and bruised, filed it away as bruised, and kept moving that he absorbed. He waited. He let Breck commit, and commit, and commit again, each time getting one more piece of information about how the Serati moved, which side it favored, how long between strikes. Then the gap opened and Darrow put the shock blade exactly where it needed to go. Breck went down. Darrow pinned him, and then he stood up and walked back to his corner because it was done, and done was enough. The crowd did not cheer. It went quiet in a way that was louder than noise. In the observation gallery, Yada pulled up the fight biometrics. She read them twice. His cortisol and adrenaline had not peaked and crashed the way every other species in the database did. They had climbed through the hits, through the pain signals, through the end of the fight, and they were still climbing. She flagged it as a possible equipment error. She knew it was not an equipment error. She saved the data in a private file and labeled it simply human. Fight 1. And across the station, in a private viewing room with a very expensive chair, Warden Ossel watched the footage back at half speed and thought about the next match, and whether he had priced this one correctly. He scheduled Darrow for 48 hours out. A harder opponent. He wanted to find a ceiling. The Thurvian was called Roga. It stood 2.5 meters at the shoulder, walked on 4 limbs, fought with 2, and had once ended a match by picking up its opponent and using it to break a barrier wall. The arena staff called it reliable. What they meant was predictable. Roga had one strategy: absorb everything, then overwhelm. It had mass the way planets have mass, not threatening, just present, in a way that made other things adjust. Darrow watched 3 minutes of Roga's previous fights on the cell screen, and then turned it off. Foss, watch him do this. You've seen enough? I've seen what I need. It's twice your size. Twice my size isn't twice my problem, Darrow said. Twice my size means twice the surface area to work with. Foss sat down on the edge of the equipment bench, rubbed his eyes, and made a decision, silently, internally, that he was going to stop being surprised by this man and just start paying attention. The fight lasted 11 minutes. Roga landed 3 hits that should have ended it. The first caved in the left side of Darrow's chest armor and left him with a fractured arm. The second hit sent him across the floor. The third was a grapple that lasted 40 seconds and looked from every angle in the arena like a man being slowly crushed by a piece of heavy machinery. Then Darrow found the nerve cluster at the base of Roga's left neck and pressed the shock blade against it for 1.5 seconds. Roga dropped. Darrow stood up with his left arm hanging wrong, walked to the arena's medical checkpoint, and told the attendant, a small Bernathi with 3 eyes and a face built for compassion, that he needed a splint. The Bernathi looked at the arm. You need surgery and 3 days of assisted cellular repair. When's the next fight? The Bernathi told him. Darrow looked at the arm and thought about it. Splint and tape, he said. I'll be careful with it. The Bernathi made a sound that was, in its language, the equivalent of a quiet, respectful despair. Yada came that afternoon. No scanner this time. No badge held out like a reason. She just sat on the chair across from his cot and said, I want to ask you something. Ask, Darrow said. She asked about Grin 7. She had read the colony file. She read all the fighter origin files. It was part of her process, and she understood, technically, the conditions there. Low oxygen margins, high toxicity mineral environment, seismic instability in the lower shafts. She understood it the way a person understands a number. But what was it like, she said, to live there? Darrow was quiet for a moment, not because he didn't know the answer, because he was deciding how much of it to say to someone who had never been inside a shaft where the walls hummed. He told her about the dark. The specific dark of being 1/2 kilometer underground with 1 lamp and the sound of the rocks shifting. He told her about the year the gas pockets opened in Tunnel 9 and 4 men did not come back, and nobody cried until the day after because crying the same day felt too soon, like it was giving up. He told her about the air and how you learned to tell the difference between the kind that was fine and the kind that would be fine for another 6 minutes, and then would not be fine at all. I've been in worse dark than this arena, he said. This place has lights and food and a Foss. He looked at Foss, who was pretending to adjust equipment on the far side of the room. The dark here is the kind that has rules. I can work with that. Yada looked at him for a long time after that. She was thinking about the biometric data, about the climbing cortisol, about the fact that his body seemed to treat increasing danger not as a signal to prepare for death, but as a signal to become more capable of surviving it. She thought about what that meant, about where it came from, about a species that had apparently evolved on a planet that required this response, and then spent centuries developing it further on mining asteroids and colony rocks, where the only thing standing between you and dying was the decision to keep going. She saved this conversation in the same private file. She wrote one line under it. This is not trauma response. This is adaptation that in the upper levels of the Gorham Ring. Director Verith held a briefing with 3 of his senior physiologists. He had the fight footage up. He had Darrow's biometrics up. He had the comparative species data up. One physiologist, Dr. Noss, a dry-spoken Karithi who had spent 40 years classifying fighter species, cleared his throat. Director, the Galactic Species Register currently classifies humans as a Category 2 species. Limited natural threat level. No significant biological advantages. I am aware, Verith said. That classification is incorrect. Noss brought up the data. Pain tolerance, adrenaline response curve, psychological threat processing. All are significantly beyond what the Category 2 designation accounts for. The combat data alone from these 2 fights warrants a reclassification review. But more than the physiology, he paused. It is the behavior after injury. Most species disengage or degrade in function. The human shows a contrary pattern. Verith looked at the footage of Darrow walking off the floor with a fractured arm, asking about the next fight. He becomes more dangerous when he's damaged, Verith said quietly. It appears so. We are attempting to model the mechanism. We don't have one yet. Verith watched the footage again. There was something in Darrow's eyes in the post-fight frame. Not triumph, not anger, something quieter and more durable than either that he made a decision. Schedule the trial of 3, he said. The full broadcast package. 42 systems. He turned off the screen. Let the galaxy see what this is. And let us find where the ceiling is. What Verith did not say, what he was not yet ready to say, was that he was also watching the crowd data from the first 2 fights. The way the silence had spread through the stands. Not the silence of a boring match. The silence of a crowd that had seen something it did not have words for yet, and was still looking for them. That kind of silence, in his experience, was where very large things started. The announcement went out across 42 star systems on a Thursday. The Gorham Ring would host a trial of 3. 1 fighter, 3 opponents. No rest between bouts. It had been attempted 9 times in the ring's history. It had never been completed. The fighter offered for this cycle was a human from a debt colony asteroid, with 2 wins and a fractured arm that had not fully healed. Ticket requests overwhelmed the system in 4 hours. Broadcast figures were projected at 3 billion before the event even began. Foss found out from the schedule board and came to Darrow's cell with the look of a man who had received very bad news and was trying to find somewhere to put it. Darrow was sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, the flat stone from Gren, 7 turning in the fingers of his good hand. You heard, Foss said. Yes. 3 fights. No rest. The 3rd one is Gora. You know who Gora is. 7 cycles undefeated. Prokthy. Natural body armor and a neural cluster system that makes it resistant to shock weapons. Darrow kept turning the stone. I saw the file. Foss sat down on the floor next to him, which was not something Foss's knees thanked him for. Darrow, this is designed for you to lose. Most things are, Darrow said. I do it anyway. A long silence. Then Darrow said, can you set up a feed to Grand 7? Secure line. I want Lena to be able to watch. Foss looked at him. You want your sister watching you do this? I want her to see it when I come out the other side, Darrow said simply. Foss got the feed set up. He did not ask how Darrow was so sure. He had stopped asking that kind of question somewhere around the second fight. The morning of the trial, Yada ran biometrics one more time. She had begun doing this before every fight, officially part of her research protocol, unofficially because she felt, in a way she could not have explained to her colleagues, that it mattered, that someone should be paying attention. She watched his numbers on the walk to the arena floor. Steady, building, purposeful, not the numbers of a person preparing for death. The numbers of something that had decided, at a level below language, that today was a working day. Fight 1 was a Sarati champion, faster than Breck, better trained, with 2 cycles of arena experience behind it. The crowd recognized the quality of the match. They watched with the focused attention of people who understood what they were seeing. Darrow won in 9 minutes. He was bleeding from a cut above his eye when the first opponent went down. He stood in the center of the floor, chest moving, and waited in medical contact between bouts. Syndicate rules. Yada watched her scream. His reserves should have been pulling back, conserving. Instead, they held. Fight 2 was a droll pack fighter. 2 nervous systems, 1 body, capable of sustaining damage that would drop a single system creature, because there was always a second system carrying the load. The arena had lost 3 fighters to droll opponents in the past 2 years. It was the hardest 4 minutes of Darrow's life up to that point. He went down once. Hard. The crowd made a sound, not excitement, something lower than that. He lay still for 2 full seconds, which was 2 seconds longer than most fighters who went down that way ever lay still for, because most of them did not get back up. Darrow got back up he got back up slowly, and that was somehow worse to watch than if he had jumped to his feet. Slowly meant deliberate. Slowly meant he had assessed, decided, and chosen. The crowd went very quiet. He won ugly, and he won damaged, with 1 arm still not right from 2 days ago, and new damage stacking on top of it. He stood in the center of the floor again, and this time he went to 1 knee, head down. Just breathing, just being present in his body, and checking what was still working in the preparation corridor. Foss was on his feet with both hands pressed flat on the observation glass. Inner monitoring station. Yada had stopped writing notes. On the feed line to Grand 7. In a colony med bay, with bad lighting and a screen that flickered at the edges, Lena sat in a chair with her hands in her lap and watched, and did not look away. Gora walked onto the arena floor. The crowd found its voice for Gora. 7 cycles. Undefeated. The Hrakthi moved with the absolute certainty of something that had never had a reason to doubt itself. It looked at Darrow, on 1 knee, bleeding, arm taped and wrong, and felt the first unfamiliar thing it had felt in 7 cycles of fighting. That it felt like it should wait a moment. Like something here required more attention than usual. The signal sounded. Gora did not wait anymore. The fight was long. Longer than anything else on the record for the Gorm Ring that year. It was not a fight that looked good in any particular moment. It was a fight that accumulated. Each exchange, Gora won on power. Each exchange, Darrow gave ground, absorbed, found an inch, and held it. The inch did not look like much, but inches stacked to the halfway point. Gora felt something it had no name for yet. It would find a name later, in quieter moments. The name was doubt, not fear. Just the first small question. What does it take? Darrow won in the last 30 seconds of the longest fight the ring had hosted in 4 years. He did not pin Gora. He did not humiliate him. He simply put him down in the precise, efficient way he put everything down, and then stood up, and then the crowd found what it had been reaching for. Across 42 star systems, 3.4 billion viewers watch a human being stand in the center of the galactic arena with 2 opponents' worth of damage on his body, a fractured arm, and blood on his face, standing like it was nothing. Standing like he had somewhere to be. Foss had both hands over his face. Yada was writing again, very fast, because there was a great deal to record. On the Grand 7 feed, Lena pressed her palm flat against the flickering screen and held it there, in his private viewing room. Director Verith sat very still and watched his communication board light up with 14 incoming requests from factions across the sector. Everyone wanted the human. Everyone wanted to talk about the human. Everyone wanted to know what came next. Verith had no answer for that yet. He had found the ceiling, and the ceiling was not where he had expected it to be. It was not there at all. They gave him 3 days this time. Nobody argued about the splint. The first day, Darrow slept. Not because anyone told him to, not because the adrenaline had finally crashed, but because his body logged the debt and he paid it without complaint. 12 hours, still and quiet in the cell on Fighter Block 7, while the Gorham ring hummed around him with the sound of a machine that never stopped. On the second day, Lena called. Foss had kept the secure line open. He had not mentioned it to Darrow and had not mentioned it to anyone else either, which had cost him 2 favors with the communications officer, and he counted it as money well spent. The screen flickered. Grin. 7 had bad signal. It always had bad signal. Darrow sat cross-legged on his cot and watched his sister's face resolve out of static. And for the first time since he had boarded the transport, he let his shoulders drop slightly. She did not say she was proud. She had told him once that she didn't believe in proud. It was a word people used when they wanted credit for something someone else had done. She just looked at him through bad pixels and said, "You look terrible. Fractured arm. Cut above the eye. 2 bruised ribs from the droll," he said. "Are you eating?" Foss makes sure. "Good." She paused. "Come home, Darrow." "I will." She looked like she was going to say something else. She didn't. The call ended because Grin 7 connections always ended before you were ready for them to. Yada came on the 3rd day and sat down without asking. She had stopped pretending to need a reason. She told him the truth. His biometric data, she said, had been forwarded to 5 research institutions across the galaxy in the past 48 hours. Not by her, by the syndicate's own medical division, which had finally looked at the numbers and understood what they were looking at. There were papers being written. There were classification boards being convened. The Galactic Species Register, which had not updated a threat level classification in 11 years, was an emergency session. Humans, she told him, were going to be reclassified. Not just threat level, endurance ratings, physiological resilience indices, psychological stress response categories. All of it. The galaxy's official record of what humans were was being rewritten, at least in part, because of what had happened on that arena floor. Darrow listened to all of this without expression. When she finished, he asked one question. Will it protect the colony? Yada opened her mouth, closed it. She had not been expecting that question, and she realized she should have been. Of course, that was the question. She looked down at her hands and said, "Honestly, I don't know yet." Foss came an hour later and closed the door behind him, which meant it was not good news that he sat down. He explained the syndicate's decision carefully, in the way of a man who has been in bad situations before and knows that the delivery matters. The debt contract, he said, was cleared. Darrow's earnings from the trial of 3 alone had covered Grin 7's obligation 4 times over. That part was done, but Director Verith had filed a new contract classification, asset of exceptional value. It was an old provision in syndicate law, almost never used, designed to allow the syndicate to retain fighters or property that had become, in their assessment, too significant to release under standard terms. Under this classification, Darrow's contract did not end. It continued indefinitely under syndicate management for as long as Verith decided it should. The room was quiet for a while. Darrow turned the stone from Grin 7 over in his hand once. Twice. 3 times. Then he said, "Foss, in syndicate law, is there a provision for a formal grievance match?" Foss looked up. A grievance challenge. Yes. Ancient clause. Nobody uses it because you need legal standing, and most non-Verac species don't. Do I have standing? Foss stopped talking. He reached for his screen. He ran the parameters. He read the results twice. He put the screen down and looked at Darrow with an expression that was somewhere between alarmed and something he had not felt in a very long time. "You have standing," he said quietly. "The trial of 3 wins put your arena record above the threshold. You have legal standing to challenge a syndicate official to a formal grievance process, conducted in the arena's arbitration chamber, judged by neutral arbiters from registered neutral species. And if I file the challenge, Verith either accepts or the contract is automatically void. If he accepts and loses the arbitration, the contract is void and a binding ruling goes into the galactic record." Foss paused. "Darrow, no non-Verac species has ever filed this challenge. Not once in the syndicate's history." "Good," Darrow said. "File it." Foss filed it. The syndicate's legal system received the challenge at the fourth hour of the evening cycle and flagged it as an anomaly because the filing category had not been used in 230 years and the system required a manual override to process. ITWY morning, it had been manually overwritten. By afternoon, it had been verified. By evening, 14 news services across the sector had picked up the story. Darrow, the human from Grand 7, the fighter who would not fall, had turned his fury sideways and aimed it at the law itself. In his office, Director Verith read the filing and was quiet for a very long time. His senior advisor, Sori, old, measure for decades in syndicate service, sat across from him and waited. "Well," he said finally. "You brought a creature from a death world into your ring," Sori said. She was not unkind about it. She was just accurate. "You gave it an audience. You gave it a cause. Then you tried to own it." She folded her hands. "Whatever happens next, Director, we did this to ourselves." Verith stared at the filing, at the name at the bottom, at the planet of origin listed next to it. Grin, 7, Outer Sector, Category 2 Colony. He thought about the 14 communication requests still blinking on his board. He thought about 3.4 billion viewers. He thought about the stone the human carried in his pocket. He had seen it on the arena feed. Had noticed in that particular way you notice small things about dangerous people, that Darrow touched it before every fight, that he accepted the challenge, that he had no choice. But he also made one private call to someone who knew the colony, someone who might, with the right pressure, give Verith something he could use. The arbitration was set. The galaxy turned to watch. The arbitration chamber sat in the center of the Gorham ring like a room that had decided to take itself seriously. Stone gray walls, neutral lighting, no crowd noise from outside. Though outside the stands were full and the broadcast numbers had already broken every record the ring had ever posted. 3 arbiter chairs at the front, occupied by elders from 3 registered neutral species. The Veth, the Kalanori, and the old Hrock the Elder Goran, who had taken the seat not because his species had no stake in the outcome, but because he had asked to, and nobody had found a legal reason to refuse him. Darrow sat on one side of the chamber floor. Director Verith sat on the other, with 2 legal advisors and Warden Ossel behind him. Foss was in the observation row. Yato was next to him, with a data screen she was no longer pretending was for research. She was just watching. The challenge process under syndicate law was structured in 3 rounds. Each round had components: documentary evidence, witness testimony, and a concluding statement. The arbiters scored each component. 2 rounds, 1 out of 3 into the challenge. Verith opened his first round with the expected move. Ossel took the witness stand and described, in careful legal language, the circumstances of Darrow's original contract. Voluntary filing. Informed consent. No coercion recorded on any syndicate document. The asset of exceptional value classification, Ossel argued, was a standard business measure applied fairly and within the bounds of syndicate LAW-IT was technically accurate. Every word. Darrow did not argue with the words. He asked Yada to submit the data she had compiled over the past months. Not fight data. Something else. 18 months of records from the syndicate's own systems. The original debt schedule applied to Grand 7. The inflated interest rates applied to colonies classed as Category 2. The pattern across 47 other debt colony worlds where the same contract structures had been applied, the same voluntary fighters submitted, the same asset clauses filed against any who survived long enough to matter. The arbiters read in silence for a long time. Goran, the Hrock the Elder, looked up first. He said nothing. He just made a small mark on his scoring sheet. The second round was harder. Verith came prepared. He brought a legal argument that challenged Darrow's, standing on the grounds that the grievance clause had historically applied to Varek citizens in contractual disputes with each other. He had old precedents. He had language that he also made a decision that would cost him. The applicant species, Verith said, is registered as Category 2 in the Galactic Species Register. Limited threat classification. Minimal cognitive complexity in formal legal engagement. It is the syndicate's position that granting full legal standing to a Category 2 organism under provisions designed for registered citizens creates a precedent that what? Darrow asked. That IT was not an interruption in the technical sense. Vareth had paused. Darrow had simply filled the silence, and his voice in that room carried the same quality it carried in every other room. Not loud, not angry, just completely present. The kind of voice that made the room smaller. That protects beings the Syndicate has not chosen to protect, Darrow finished. Yes, that is exactly the precedent. He stood up. He was not supposed to give his full statement yet. The Arbiters did not stop him. I am not going to tell you humans are peaceful, he said. We are not. We come from a planet that tried to kill us for 4 million years, and we are the result of that argument. I know what I am. I know what I look like in a ring. He paused. But I did not come here violent. The Syndicate set the terms. Debt we couldn't pay, with interest rates applied to colonies that had no other trade options, with no legal recourse, no representation, no path out except a body. You built a system where the only thing people like us had to offer was our suffering for the entertainment of the strong. We followed your rules. We just turned out to be very hard to break under them. He looked at the Arbiters, not at Vareth, at the 3 neutral elders. This is not about me. Grin 7's debt is already cleared. This is about the 47 other colonies in your own record that are sitting on the same clock right now. The challenge is for them. The ruling goes in the galactic record. That's all I'm asking. The room was very quiet. Goran made another mark. The Kalinori Arbiter leaned across to the Veth and said something in a low voice. The Veth nodded twice. The third round was short. Vareth's legal team attempted one more argument. The Arbiters allowed it. They listened. They scored. The ruling took 12 minutes to finalize. Unanimous. All 3 components of the second and third rounds to Darrow. Contract void. Asset classification struck. A binding precedent entered into galactic record. Debt colony contracted fighters held under extended syndicate clauses had the right to file and receive full legal standing in grievance proceedings, regardless of species classification. The first legal protection for contracted fighters from debt colony worlds, written into galactic law. Vareth was escorted from the chamber by his own legal team rather than his guards. No drama. Just the quiet removal of someone who had run out of moves. 2 days later, his own inner council voted on a restructuring. He was not part of the new structure. The Syndicate did not collapse. It adjusted because that was what institutions did. They bent instead of broke, and the bending was slow and incomplete and better than nothing. Sori watched him go and felt nothing that could be called satisfaction. Just the tired recognition of something she had seen before. A man who had confused his position for his judgment. The transport to Grin 7 departed on a quiet morning cycle, as most transports did. Darrow was in the bay with his bag on one shoulder, the stone in his pocket, watching the ring's docking lights through the port. Yada found him there. She told him she was submitting a full reclassification report on humans to the Galactic Species Register. Not just the threat level amendment, the full spectrum, endurance indices, adaptation data, protective instinct measures, psychological stress response curves. The complete picture as far as the data could carry it. What will it say? Darrow asked. She thought about it for a moment. Approach with caution, she said. Not because humans are dangerous, but because they care about things. And in the data, that makes them more dangerous than anything else we have ever measured. Darrow looked at her. He almost smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but she saw it. That's fair, he said. The boarding signal sounded. He picked up his bag. He turned to go. Darrow, she said, what will you do when you get back? He did not hesitate. Work, he said, and walked up the ramp. The ship pulled away from the ring in the clean, efficient way that Syndicate ships always moved. No ceremony, no acknowledgement, just the physical fact of departure. The lights of the Gorham ring fell behind. The stars in front opened up the way stars always do, indifferent and enormous and full of distance. In his colony hall, Darrow had raised one hand with nothing in it. No weapon, no training, no plan beyond the decision to go. He had walked into the galactic arena armed with nothing but fury he had not known, standing in that crowded room with his sister's frightened eyes in front of him. That fury, properly held, properly aimed, properly endured across every fight and every rule, and every system designed to use it up and discard what was left. Was the most powerful thing in the known galaxy. He knew it now. And so did everyone else. The ship moved through the dark. Grin, 7 was 6 hours out that he was going home.